Hi, welcome to the House of Graphic Literature. I'm your host, Bat, aka the Bio Boosted Esper. And today, we're going to be starting a brand new series known as Format Fallout, a show that discusses comic book formats that just don't exist anymore. A lot of these are going to be company specific. For this one, it's DC. And the reason before I get started here, I just wanted to say the reason that I started this series is because I simply I don't see enough people talk about comic book format. And the way that I am, I love to discuss this shit. I love talking about limited paperbacks and hardcovers. I love to discuss omnibuses and Marvel Essential collections and just I I love formats and I especially love reproduction in those formats. And I feel like that's mainly what we're going to be discussing today is reproduction. But I also want to talk about the accessibility of these and why they were kind of a game changer. Because this line started in 1986, the year after Crisis on Infinite Earths. The story that wiped the slate completely clean for DC Comics to reboot with brand new writers and artists for these characters who have been around since the late 30s. And so, this was a really great way to not only get people up to speed, but also sort of be like, hey, we have these brand new books out on the stands, but if you're ever curious to know about what these characters used to be like, pick up one of these. And I think this was especially great because these were sold directly in bookstores because these have the DC logo anointed on them, but these were published by Warner Books, which means that these were not in comic stores. These were in bookstores. These were in the library. So that meant that any Joe Schmo could pick this up and flip through it. And that is really the crux of what made this format so great. But enough talk. Let's actually discuss the format itself and why it's so great. And for the example, I'm just gonna flip through each of these, but I want to start with the greatest Golden Age stories ever told. This one is really cool because it has a lot of material that has never been reprinted. Something that I think is really great about these is that these all have custom contents pages that fit what we're looking for in a lot of these volumes. There you go. There's this version of the table of contents, which has this very nice piece right here. The Batman one has more of a Batman like font with darker colors. The Superman one has a very like bright and cheery font with brighter colors. This is the type of book design that I think really is really excellent. It has all of these have a little introduction by whoever. It really just depends on who they get. This one is by Julie Schwartz, which makes sense because he was big for the team up genre for DC. This one's done by Roy Thomas because he's a big Golden Age nut. That's his thing. The Batman one is done by Dick Giordano. And the Superman one, I can't really remember who did that one. But then we have a second forward by Mike Gold. And these all have really excellent black and white illustrations right here. And then we get right into the story. And a great thing about these is that they showcase the very best of the best. And I mean that when I say it. Because we start out with a story by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby, The Boy Commandos, something that had not really been reprinted before this. The 70s had a nice little reprint that they did in 2 issues for the Boy Commandos, but that was it. There was no Boy Commandos collection, and it was pretty hard to get your hands on those early issues. So seeing a full Boy Commando story reprinted here, that's really cool. And something that I do want to mention here is the colors. The colors of these are really interesting, and I feel like you don't really get to see it enough with that Golden Age volume. I'll pull out this Superman one, so really kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about here. So the Superman one, the colors in this are weird. Right here. Stuff like this. What is that? Well, my friend, that's a gradient. Gradients are very... They're all throughout these reprints. Why gradients were added, I don't know. My only guess is that they were added to sort of appeal to the wider audience. Because, as we know, comic books are printed, or at least comic book reprints are printed for, at least today, they're printed for completionists, collectors, people who want everything to look really nice and pristine. And that's unfortunately also a that's also a sentiment that's shared by the general public. They want their stuff to look nice. They don't like yellow pages. They don't like the Ben-Day dots. Like they want it to be nice and clear and clumped together so it's easily readable. And that's and a lot of that started with these collections and the DC archives for that matter, but and unfortunately the colors play exactly into that. Because we do have all these gradients. They're not as obviously as you go along here, they're not as prominent, but every once in a while it'll still pop up, and it'll look really weird because gradients don't look right on this old artwork. But regardless, I still think that the actual reproduction on these is pretty serviceable, personally. I think they're not bad at all. But there we go. So, Black Canary, Carmine Infantino. Great artist. Fantastic artist. Great cartoonist. Known for New Look Batman, which there's a New Look Batman story featured in that volume right there. But then we get some more unconventional shit, like Kid Eternity. But this shows off the great work of Mac Rayboy. An artist who's often forgotten by everyone else but, people this old to remember this shit. Scribbly. This is not something that you would ever expect featured in here. The only time that I've ever seen Scribbly stories reprinted was in the Smithsonian Book of Comic Book Comics. And those are done straight, which I find just so interesting that they would reprint that. But it was an important part of DC. DC wasn't just superhero books. There you go. Alex Toth. Everyone knows and loves Alex Toth. Did you know he drew Green Lantern? A lot of people don't, but now you do. The Sandman, the original Sandman, before Kirby got his hands on him. This is a really just... There you go. The Jay Garrick Flash, Murphy Anderson. Starman. Jack Burnley. Ah, yeah. The early Spectre stuff. By Bernard Bailey. Written by Jerry Siegel, mind you. I just realized it was slightly out of frame. Vigilante. Jerry Robinson and Mort Meskin. Classic cowboy stories. That was another big part of DC. Cowboy stories. The very first Slam Bradley story done by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster from Detective Comics #1. This is where you can sort of see that the The reproduction really starts to fall apart, and that's also obvious with the Superman volume, is that the Jerry Siegel Joe Shuster stuff looks really weird, and that's because of the reproduction, because all the colors are so clumped together, is that it looks kind of strange. Here we have some quality comics. Black Condor by Lou Fine. Probably best known for his work on The Spirit as a fill-in while Eisner was at war. But there you go, Black Condor. Often forgotten character. Johnny Quick. Done by Dan Barry. Best known for The Phantom. Then, of course, Superman Returns to Krypton. Classic Al Plastino Superman story. Late Golden Age, but still Golden Age regardless. Robot Man. Often forgotten Robot Man by Jimmy Thompson. Not to be confused with Robot Man from the Doom Patrol. Which is funny, because a lot of the art in the Robot Man book does kind of remind me of Al Plastino. Not Al Plastino. Damn, I forgot his name. Bruno Premiani, that's it. Blackhawk. Blackhawk by Reed Crandall. We didn't get Eisner Blackhawk, but Reed Crandall Blackhawk is almost as good. Wonder Woman. H.G. Peter. William Marston. Classic Golden Age Wonder Woman with the Leroy lettering. It's excellent. Excellent stuff. And then what I really like about this this volume is that it ends with a classic All-Star Comics story, which features, just a shooting gallery of names. Erwin Hassan, Joe Kubert, Carmine Infantino, Alex Toth. The very best of the best of this era, all drawing their respective characters. Perfect. Perfect showcase of this format. And I love this part. At the very end, these always feature biographies for each of the writers and artists. And so, for many kids, this was how they learned. This was how they learned about a lot of these people. And that's honestly what was really great about these, is that not only did these act as a great sample platter for those who didn't know about these characters, it also acted as a thorough way of learning about a lot of these very prolific writers and artists. This Greatest Team Up Stories one is really fun. This, of course, features, very famous Flash of Two Worlds story. It has the first Green Lantern, Green Arrow story. It has that great Superman and Adam Strange story. There's another story by Alex Toth in here. It has some of the early Crisis on Earth 1 stuff, which totally isn't my bag, but I know a lot of people enjoy that shit. But you can catch me dead trying to read all this. Again, another great showcase of artists like Joe Kubert and Dick Dillon, and just all the writers and artists that matter, I feel. There you go, Alex Toth on this one. Alex Toth drawing the Flash, nonetheless. That's really cool. And that's honestly no, that's what made these so great, is that it was a perfect way of understanding what really was the best of the best of these eras. And by the time you've picked up a bunch of these, you learn a lot. You really do. There you go, Batman and the Creeper by Jim Aparo. There's so much to learn. Oh, there you go. Superman and Swamp Thing. One of the very best right here. I love this story. Drawn by Rick Veitch, no less. You see, that's what's so great about this format. Not only the stories included, but introducing you to all of these artists that you would have never known about. This Batman one was very formative for a lot of people, including myself. I had a different version of this. I didn't have specifically this one, but this features, it featured Neil Adams' Batman stories. It featured this story right here, which inspired like many a tale. It features a story drawn by Frank Robbins, one of the very finest artists that a lot of people just forget. It features a story by my Ride or Die Batman artist, Marshall Rogers. It features 2 stories by my Ride or Die Batman artist, Marshall Rogers. And it's immediately followed up with a Walt Simonson Batman story. You can't beat that. You really can't. And you see, these are beautiful. They're hardcover. They have great dust jackets, and under, they look fucking phenomenal. And there were many of these made. This isn't all of them. This is only 4 of them. There was also a Greatest Joker Stories Ever Told. There was a Greatest Flash Stories Ever Told. There was one that was specifically just about the 50s. But eventually, the hardcovers kind of fizzled out, and they were changed to softcover. I don't have any of those here. But more or less, it was the same content, just reprinted in softcover. There were second volumes made for a lot of these. There was a second Greatest Superman Stories Ever Told, a second Greatest Batman Stories Ever Told. And these are, pretty easy to get your hands on, I think. And again, those just reprint just some of the very best of this era. And that's really what you need. That's like, these are the kind of books that I feel like are formative to artists, and future writers. There are plenty of pros that I still see saying, oh yeah, I still have these books. I still pull them off the shelf. I still flip through them. I'm still learning. I'm still learning all these great things because of collections like these. And it's really unfortunate that this format just doesn't exist anymore, because it's perfect for people who want to learn. This format didn't completely fizzle out by the 2000s, though. It did get a second life, but in a very different way. For one, it was renamed to character name The Greatest Stories Ever Told, rather than The Greatest Character Stories Ever Told. But a lot of characters were given volumes that weren't previously given volumes. For example, Captain Marvel. There was no Captain Marvel one of these. There should have been, because Captain Marvel is just as important as any of these guys. But, eventually we did get one. And it featured, once again, great work. Not only by C.C. Beck, but by Jack Kirby. All of this that you're looking at right now, this is Jack Kirby work. Hard to believe, huh? And then we even get stuff from the Captain Marvel reboot from the 70s. We get this rip-off Captain Marvel story. We get one of the very finest Superman annuals I've ever read that features art by Gil Kane. This taught me so much. And that's really what this format is for, I think. It's a teaching format. It's a format that teaches you about the greatest. And it sort of managed to influence so many great creators to this day. And it's the fact that these don't exist anymore that I feel that a lot of people just aren't as well versed in the old stuff. These books are great to have because they teach so much. They kind of do the bare minimum in teaching because, eventually, but it's a great stepping stone. It's the same way that a lot of people picked up those early Les Daniels books, like stuff like comics, or even like the center DC Marvel stuff. It taught you so much. It taught me so much. And so that's what these kind of give. They kind of give that same way of like, here's the stuff of this era. Now go out and look for some of it on your own. And I understand that a lot of people aren't fans of old comics. And I get it. A lot of that stuff isn't as great as it was back then. But I feel like it's a great way to understanding comics and just sort of like seeing the landscape of what made comics so interesting and groundbreaking in those eras, especially the great artists and writers who really sort of turned that upside down. And that's why I think that we need a greatest stories ever told format again. And we have some close approximations, but they're not called the greatest stories ever told. They're anniversary collections. And the DC anniversary collections are not bad by any means, but they're not anything to write home about. They're done in the same way that omnibuses or regular trade paperbacks are done, where it's very glossy paper. There's not a lot of work done on the reproduction. It's more or less just, it's the same shit. Slapdash a forward from another volume and printed in a nice big hardcover, and there you go. That's really all you get. And it's not, again, it's not a bad format, and I feel like a lot of people are probably going to learn via that, but those are really not sold anywhere else but comic stores. And trust me, I go to comic stores all the time. I still see those on the shelves sometimes because they just didn't sell as good as people had hoped they would. And the last ditch effort of this format was the greatest detective stories ever told. A single volume that was released in, I believe, 2019. And that featured stuff about the Elongated Man. It featured that Great Detective Comics annual that's done by 3 different artists, including Carmine Infantino, and also has a nice little Sherlock Holmes story in there. It has the Lois Lane miniseries, which a lot of people forget about because it was so small, but it was written around the exact same time as the John Byrne Superman stuff. And it has stuff like that. Stuff that people who are interested in mysteries and detectives might enjoy. But these, I feel, give you a full scope of the era. These give you a full idea of what to expect. Those are for someone who just wants to see some fun detective stories, which isn't a bad thing, but it's not really the best way to revive this format. And personally, I don't think they're ever going to, but it'd be nice if they did. Because I always hear the question of where should I start with comics? And for whenever it comes to DC, I really do recommend here. Take a look at these. These are really cool. It's a great way of understanding the landscape and the real best of the best. And so if there's anything that I want you to take away from this video, is reading old comics is fucking awesome. And it's really not like it's not as much of a hurdle as you think it might be. And these really are just a great place to start and become versed in comics history. At least DC Comics history, because of course you're not going to get too much about Marvel from these. But anyways, that's where we're going to stop for here. I really hope you enjoyed the very first episode of Format Fallout. I can't wait to talk more about a lot of the forgotten formats that have plagued comics forever. And it's likely that a lot of these will never get a second day. But that's why I'm here. I'm here to put them in the spotlight and show you how great they really are. And I'm glad that I could make my debut episode about the greatest stories ever told. because it's a format that was very formative to me and to many other pros. Thank you, and goodbye.